Hey everyone, Taylor here, and we're going to be going through a tutorial on how to create a kind of wavy laser effect like you see on the screen right now. You can use this in UI, you can use it as a weapon effect, there's many different ways to use it. So yeah, I'll just kind of go through what we're going to be using today. We're going to be using Maya for the modeling and UV editing. You can use Blender. It should be pretty easy to translate what I'm showing you over to Blender. It's pretty fundamental stuff we're working with today. The UV mapping gets a little complex at some points, but it's more just wrapping your head around it. The technical part is very simple. Then we're going to be bringing it into Unity, and we're going to be using Amplify Shader Editor. You can also use the Unity shader graph to do the same thing. I haven't used the Unity shader graph a lot yet, so I wanted to use Amplify Shader because I'm very comfortable with it, but it should translate over well. So let's get started, and yeah, we're going to start by jumping into Maya. So I'm here in Maya. I have a brand new scene, and it might look a little different from the scene you have. I just have one view here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a capsule. We need that shape. And then, there's so many different ways to create a capsule. I'm going to show you the way I like creating a capsule. Uh, and then we're going to get to the UV editing. So let's create that capsule to start with. So to create a capsule, I actually start with a box. I know it sounds a little weird, but let's get the box and let's just scale it up a bit. For the record, I'm not going to be going too in depth on exact sizing and stuff for this tutorial because, I mean, that's kind of up to you in your project. I'm just going to create it, import it, and show you how to do everything. You can worry about the exact requirements later. So with a box created, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Mesh. We're going to smooth it, and then we're going to hit G to smooth it again. G just repeats whatever your last command was. And then we're going to grab all the faces. We're going to delete half of it. So we've got one cap, one end of a capsule. And we're going to grab all the edges here. And I'm going to grab my move tool, which is W. I'm going to hold shift, and I'm just going to extrude that out. So, oh, sorry, I screwed this up already. That's okay. Mistakes are good. So what we're going to actually do, so we're going to go back to smooth. So we're going to start with the smooth sphere, and we're not actually going to delete half these faces. I'm sorry, that's my mistake. We're going to grab all these faces and we're going to extrude them out because then we keep both caps, right? Just makes sense. So hold shift and extrude a node, and you have a capsule. That was pretty simple. So I'll just switch back to Unity for 1 sec. I just want to explain something. To get this wavy effect, what we're doing is in the shader, we're using vertex placement, vertex, I forget the wording. Anyways, we're moving vertices using a noise map. And I'm going to show you how to do that in the shader, but there's something we have to understand. In order to move the vertices and make it look like it does, we need to have enough vertices to move. So that's one thing we are going to have to add to the middle of the shader. We need a bunch of vertices in the middle, right? So easy way to do that. Let's just make this a little longer here. And before I do that, I'm just going to grab my object. I'm going to reset the pivot. So under tool settings here, I'm just going to reset. And then at the top, I'm just going to go 0, 0, 0. I'm just going to center that object again. Now, the easiest way to add vertices is to go into face mode, select all the middle faces, shift right click, and go to add divisions to faces. Okay. So I'm going to do that, and we're going to, in 1 sec, I should show you how to do it a different way. So just click this little square, that'll bring up the options. If you want to add faces over the V, which we're going to be doing, you can, and if you want to do U, you can. We're going to do V. And we're actually going to add a little more than 20. But I think I can, yeah, I can set that right here. No, I can't. Never mind. I was going to say, we can do that with these options, but let's just do that again. Hold shift, add divisions to faces. Let's do, I think we're going to go, let's go with 30. Add divisions. There. So that's lots. Um, as you can see, the more divisions we add, the more polygons we add. We're at about 576 right now, which is really nothing um, in today's modern games. But I could go a lot higher if I wanted to for my case, because really I'm just using it in a logo. You're only going to see it in the UI. There's probably not a lot else going on in the UI, hopefully, um, as far as performance goes anyway. But this should be well more than enough for our case. So let's go with it. Uh, Next thing we want to do is just smooth it out. So let's just go to Mesh Display. We're going to go Soften Edge, and that'll soften all the edges for the item we have selected. Perfect. So the next thing we need to do is set up our UVs. This is as easy or as hard as you want it to be. UVs can be set up um, differently depending on the object. We actually need them to be set up in quite a specific way for what we're doing today. So we have to be pretty careful on how to set up our UVs. So um, I have a shortcut for a panel layout for UVs, but if you don't have something like that, which most people probably don't, just go into Windows, Modeling Editors, and go UV Editor. And then as soon as you click this, we'll see that it has our UVs laid out. Obviously not the way we want. So the first thing I always do is I go UV Automatic, and that's going to, at very least, set up all the UVs to be edited. Second thing I usually do is I take all those UVs, make sure I'm in object mode, so I select every edge and every UV, and I just sew them all together. So just go cut and sew and sew. And now, obviously, it's going to create a mess. We don't want that, but what this does, and why I like doing it this way, is it sets me up to edit the UVs how I want to edit them. I'm just going to get rid of this grid for a second here. I don't need that. So you can see, you know, the mess that this has created with our texture because these UVs are all sewn together and whatever. We're going to fix that right away. So actually, I don't even really want a texture on here, so I'm just going to get rid of the texture for now. We are going to grab our edge tool, and you know what? I think I'm just going to split this thing right down the middle. I think that's easiest. We can either do that or we can split it down the middle just on the one side. And that keeps it all together. You know what? That's actually maybe, yeah, let's do it that way. So we're going to split just on the one side. So select all the edges. So I selected from this middle here to the other end, the middle here. So we're just doing the one edge and we're going to cut. Okay, and then with the object selected, we can go modify and we're going to unfold it. So there's a lot of options in unfold. Um, if you want to just keep them how I have them here, that's probably good enough for this case. And I'm going to hit apply. And it's just going to take 2 seconds and there's our object. You can see it didn't unfold them amazingly. There's a little bit of a difference, like it kind of like dips down in the middle here on the U. I think, that's mostly okay. We're going to fix it up ourselves anyway. So let's get started with that. First thing we're going to do is grab the UV shell and we're going to see if we can lay this out a little better. So there's this layout option here. And we're just going to see here. So it's going to unfold it again, but that's okay. We don't really need to worry about that. Shell pre-rotation, we can probably set that. So if we want the X to align to the V, I think that's exactly what we want actually in this case. And you can play with these settings. Feel free to try this as many times as you want until you get it right. We're going to preserve the 3D ratios, yes. Actually, for this item, it doesn't really matter because it's all one object anyway. But if you're separating a mesh into a bunch of different UV maps, or a bunch of UV shells, as they're called, sorry, preserving the 3D ratios is really helpful when you're texturing, especially if you're painting it in something like Substance Painter. Everything will be at the same ratio, which is great. So let's turn off rotate and let's leave translate on, and let's pretend that the texture, well, this stuff doesn't even matter for what we're doing. So let's just hit layout UVs and see what happens. So it gave us kind of a weird rotation, which I'm not very happy with. So we might stick with this and just edit it, but I want to just try something quickly first. I want to just try cutting this whole edge. So we're going to cut it. Go back to object mode and let's go to layout again, and it's going to unfold it and lay it out. And now it's going to be two separate shells, and I just want to see what happens here. You know what? I'm not sure this is going to be of much benefit to us. Let's go back to the other way it was before. Okay, so, oh, and I want to, sorry, I'm going to undo a little more here. I just want to get rid of that cut. There we go. So the next thing we want to do is we want to align this, and I think we want to align it vertically. Um, you can do it horizontally as well. The shader I'm using is vertical, and now that I think about it, in this case, let's just go with horizontally, and I can set up the shader a little different when I do it from scratch. It makes a little more sense because the laser I'm showing in the example goes from left to right as opposed to up and down, right? So let's do it that way. So I'm going to modify, I'm going to say, um, what is that option I'm looking for here? Yeah, I can try doing straight and shell. We'll just see what happens. Yeah, see, I didn't. I think the best way to do this is we're going to normalize it, and I'll explain why quickly here. So when you're talking UV mapping, and this is pretty generic knowledge, so sorry if you're not learning anything new at this particular moment, but what we really want to do is we want to have this edge here completely lined up with the 1, and we want this whole edge completely lined up with the 0. And the reason for that is the texture we're going to be using in our shader is repeatable, and we want it to pan, and as it pans, we want it to repeat. So once that, let's pretend there's a little like dot right here, we want to go down, and once it hits this, we want it to start here again and repeat, and we just want that to keep happening, right? So we need those seams to be perfectly on the 1 and the 0. So easiest way to do that is just to click modify and go normalize. So that gets it, okay. The downside to this is it stretches it out, but we can fix that in our shader. It's a very easy thing to fix, actually. The other thing we want to do is the only part that we don't want to meet up. So when you think of the object in general, I'm just going to click on an edge here. You're going to see this edge. See how it actually meets with itself? Because this is where we're making the cut, right? All along here. And so pretend my fingers are where the cut is. What we're doing is we're going like this and then flattening it. So every part that meets in the original object, which is this object right here, we actually want to essentially match up in the UV, which is going to be really tough with a shape like this. Um, another way you could do it is separate the caps from uh, the actual, I guess, the middle. Separate the caps from the middle and then do something a little different with the caps. In our case, I'm going to leave it as is because I want I want the middle part and the caps to blend in together. And then at the very end of the caps where we can't really make those UVs meet, uh, either one, it's not going to be a problem, or two, we can deal with it in the shader by fading out the vertex displacement. So those vertexes never actually move, therefore they don't really need to be stuck together. So that's how we're going to deal with this. So first thing we want to do with these vertices, so we're going to grab all the UVs. We're going to grab this UV. We're going to grab a couple more of these right down to this guy here. And same on the other side. So grab this, this, this. Okay, and we're going to hold shift, we're going to right click, we're going to say align UVs, we're going to go say max V, and that's going to shift them right up to the top there. There's going to be a little distortion here, as you see, this got pulled quite a bit up, but in the object we're creating, with the shader we're creating, I almost guarantee you're not going to notice. So I think that's okay. So let's do it again. Okay, we're going to grab that, and we are going to grab the other side. Align UVs. And we're going to go min V on this one. That's going to bring it down all the way to the bottom. Um, and another nice thing to know here is if you want to move a bunch of vertices or even one vertex and you want it to align to the grid, just hold X and then grab it, and you can see I can align it to the grid. So we want it to be right at the bottom there. I want to do the same for these ones. Let's just hold X. We're basically just making sure it's all snapped perfectly to that one. Excellent. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to grab all of these. Be very careful not to grab any of the inner ones though. Like we don't want to grab this and this one, for example. We just want to grab the edge ones. And we're going to shift right click and we're going to say align UVs. Sorry. And we're going to say max U. That's going to pull them all the way to the 1. And then we're going to do the same thing with this guy. I actually missed him. I meant to do that. Oops. Sorry, we can't go max U because it has nothing to compare against. We're just going to hold X and drag it over. And the same with this guy. So grab as many of them as you can without grabbing any we shouldn't grab. Looks okay. We're going to grab this guy too this time, like we should have done the last one. And we're going to grab this and we've already got that. And okay, perfect. And we're just going to hold shift. We're going to say align UVs. We're going to see min U this time because we want it to go to 0, right? So that's a pretty good UV setup for this particular case. What I like about UVs is depending on what you're doing with them, you always have to do something different. You always have to think of it differently. In this case, we really just want this edge right here and this edge to always line up with a repeatable pattern. We're not so much worried about the end edges. That's more just cleanup. And then there's these little edges right here, which I'll show you which edges those are. So if I click one of these, actually I can just use the UV. So these UVs right here, you can see that I'm clicking on, they're just this little edge of the cap. And if I could show you, that would be, somewhere like right in here. So as you can see, the vertex displacement isn't really hitting there. So you're not going to see a seam as the vertices move, because what's going to happen, since these UVs aren't perfectly lined up, they're actually going to move a little bit differently with the noise map. And you're going to see like a seam of basically you're going to be able to see inside the model, which we don't want. It's going to look like a crack, right? But we'll deal with that in the shader, as I said. So the other thing we need to do is make sure that these perfectly line up. This I find annoying. There's a few ways you can do this. Maya gives you a couple tools that you can use for this, but in general, I end up just doing it by hand. Which, I mean, it's not really that hard. It's just tedious. But we're going to try some tools first, and if that doesn't work, I will fast forward through me doing it in an annoying way. So first thing we can try is, I believe there's a way to, and I could be wrong about this, UV, so select our UVs, and we'll select all that bottom row. And I believe there's a way to displace these evenly throughout a grid. I've used this before, and it didn't really work well for me, but let's see if we can work distribution distance, automatic. So let's leave it on automatic, and let's go with along the U, right? And let's hit apply. So you see how that evenly distributed them? So technically, if we do that for this, it's going to do the same thing, right? So now this should always line up with this. This should always line up with this, and so on throughout the whole way. So I think that might have actually worked. But if it didn't, we'll notice really quick in Unity once we get our shader set up. So, hey, we're good to go. Yeah, I think it actually worked. You can see that some of these UVs have a bit of a slant to them. That's just because the line isn't as straight, but let's just see. So we go a UV here and a UV here. Are those at the same spot? I don't think they are. I think something's messed up. Maybe we don't have as many UVs up here as we have down here. That could be the problem. Let's see. So that one goes there, that one goes there. So we got, so this is the middle. So we got 1, 2, and the third one's up there. And this is the middle. We got 1, 2, the third one's down there. So I think it makes sense. 1, 2, third one's down there. Ah, 1, 2. Shoot, my bad. This guy should actually be down here. This guy should be like this. So that was the mistake I had. So now if we evenly distribute these, oops, there we go. Now we're on fire. Now we're well on our way to doing this right. So we're good. The model's good. The UV's good, we think. Um, we'll find out pretty quick if it's not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, well, first of all, let's go to our outliner here and let's name this cube something different. Let's name it, let's just call it Wavy Laser. And let's get rid of the history just in case we did something we don't want to keep. So I'm going to go, so what I did there is I went edit, delete by type, history, and that will just delete what you have selected, the history of what you have selected. Do not delete all by type. I mean, you can in some cases, it's up to you, but just be careful with this. If you're doing anything with bones or animation, you usually want to just delete non-deformer history. But you know, that's a topic for another time. I'm not even going to bother getting into that right now. Just go delete history by type. Sorry, yeah, delete by type and then history. So I think other than that, we're good. Oh, the other thing we want to do is we want to freeze the transformations. So remember at the very start, I had the model kind of moved over to the left, and then what we did was we centered the pivot and we moved it over to the center again. If you look at the channel box layer, you see that there's translate numbers and scale numbers in here. So what we just want to get rid of that stuff and reset it. So modify, freeze transformations. And now we're ready to import it into Unity. So file, send to Unity, selection. And I'm going to send it to my workspace that I'm using right now. Models. I got a lot of models in here, so I'm just going to call this one Wavy Laser and export. The warnings are probably just for polygon. Yeah, don't worry about that. I'm using a default texture to test UV patterns. I have that in a lot of my scenes, and it's just saying that there might be a problem converting that from Maya to Unity. Not going to worry about it. It doesn't apply to us right now. So back in Unity, let's just hit Control R to re-import anything that we imported since the last time we used Unity or had the window focused. I'm not sure if it matters if you have auto recompile on or not. I think it might actually just auto re-import as soon as you focus the window. I have that turned off, so I have to hit Control R to do that. Now, what we're going to want to do is create a new scene. So I don't want to save this scene. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to take this off of maximize just so you can see everything else here. So under models is where I imported that. So it's a different, so Wavy Laser. So I have this FBX. We're just going to drag it right into the scene, push F to focus on it, and there's our Wavy Laser. Fun, fun. And that's it for this video. In the next one, we are going to look at creating the shader. We're going to create it from scratch using Amplify Shader Editor. And yeah, we'll get it looking just like the test one there that I showed you at the start of the video. So stick around and watch. It's going to be fun.